To start with some background, I'm a 26-year-old woman, and this year, I hosted Thanksgiving for the first time ever. Normally, my mom, who's 48, is the one who hosts Thanksgiving every single year. She's basically the family matriarch when it comes to big holiday dinners. She loves to go all out with her classic turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, her signature stuffing, and the works. It's been her thing for as long as I can remember, so when she told me this year that she was too busy to host and suggested I take over, I was both excited and absolutely terrified. Hosting Thanksgiving in my family is a big deal. We're not a gigantic family, but we're close-knit, and everyone takes holiday traditions very seriously, especially my mom. So, when she suggested I host, I took it as an opportunity to prove myself. I thought, okay, this is my chance to put my own spin on things while still honoring the tradition. I didn't want to just copy her menu. That felt too much like trying to compete, and honestly, I thought it would be fun to mix things up a little. I started planning weeks in advance. I made lists upon lists, a menu, a shopping list, a decorating plan, even a seating arrangement. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for my mom but for everyone. Instead of sticking to the traditional Thanksgiving staples, I decided to get a little creative. For the main dish, I went with a honey-glazed ham instead of a turkey. I know turkey is the centerpiece of Thanksgiving for most people, but honestly, my family isn't even that big on turkey. I figured a ham would be more practical and less likely to dry out. I also made sure to include options for everyone's dietary needs. My cousin is vegan, so I added a couple of dishes specifically for her, like a roasted vegetable medley and a vegan pumpkin curry. For the sides, I did mashed sweet potatoes with a pecan crumble, a spinach and artichoke gratin, and a wild rice pilaf instead of the usual mashed potatoes and green bean casserole. I also went all out on desserts. I set up a little dessert bar with a pumpkin pie, mini pecan tarts, and even cupcakes with autumn-themed decorations. I wanted it to feel festive but also modern, like something you'd see on Instagram. When Thanksgiving Day rolled around, I was both excited and nervous. I spent the entire day in the kitchen prepping, cooking, and making sure everything looked perfect. By the time everyone arrived, I was exhausted but proud. The table was beautifully set with fall-themed decor, think candles, mini pumpkins, and a plaid table runner, and the food was hot and ready to go. At first, everything seemed to be going well. My dad told me he loved the ham and even went back for seconds, which is a big deal because he's usually more of a turkey guy. My sister couldn't stop raving about the desserts, especially the cupcakes. Even my vegan cousin, who's usually skeptical about family gatherings because there's never much she can eat, seemed genuinely touched that I had gone out of my way to accommodate her. But then there was my mom. From the moment she walked in, I could tell something was off. She wasn't her usual bubbly, talkative self. She smiled and made polite small talk, but she didn't seem particularly engaged. During dinner, while everyone else was chatting and complimenting the food, my mom was unusually quiet. At one point, I asked her if everything was okay, and she just gave me one of those tight-lipped, "It's fine," responses. You know the kind that very clearly means it is not fine. I tried not to let it get to me. After all, everyone else seemed to be having a great time, and I had worked so hard to make the evening special. But her mood was definitely a cloud hanging over the night. She barely touched her food, and when I asked her directly if she liked the meal, she said, "It's good," but with zero enthusiasm. I could tell she wasn't happy, but I wasn't about to ruin Thanksgiving by pressing the issue. The rest of the evening went smoothly, or at least I thought it did. People stayed for a while after dinner, chatting and enjoying dessert. My dad even helped me clean up, which never happens, so that was a nice surprise. By the time everyone left, I felt like I had pulled it off. Sure, my mom had been a little weird, but I chalked it up to her being stressed or tired. Fast forward a few days later, and I get a call from her. At first, the conversation was normal. She asked how I was doing and thanked me again for hosting. But then she hit me with, "I didn't want to say this on Thanksgiving, but I feel like I need to be honest with you." My stomach dropped because I could tell this wasn't going to be good. She went on to say that the dinner just didn't feel like Thanksgiving to her. She said she missed having turkey, mashed potatoes, and her signature stuffing. She told me that Thanksgiving is about tradition and that she felt like I had strayed too far from what makes the holiday special. She even implied that the whole evening felt more like a fancy dinner party than a proper Thanksgiving. I was honestly stunned. I had worked so hard to make the night special, and hearing her say that it didn't feel like Thanksgiving to her was like a punch to the gut. I tried to stay calm and told her that I was sorry she felt that way, but that I had put a lot of thought and effort into the meal. I pointed out that everyone else seemed to enjoy it and that I had tried to make it inclusive and modern while still being festive. Her response. She just said, "Well, I guess we just have different ideas of what Thanksgiving should be," and then changed the subject. Since that conversation, I've been feeling really conflicted. On one hand, I understand that Thanksgiving is a very traditional holiday and that my mom has strong feelings about it. On the other hand, I feel like she could have at least acknowledged the effort I put in instead of focusing on what was missing. I didn't host Thanksgiving to compete with her or replace her traditions, I just wanted to do something a little different and make it my own. Now I'm stuck wondering if I messed up. Should I have stuck to a more traditional menu? Was I wrong to put my own spin on things? Or is my mom just being overly critical because she's used to being the one in charge? Everyone else seemed to have a great time, so why can't I just let her comments roll off my back? I don't know. Maybe I'm overthinking this, but I'd love to hear what other people think. Did I screw up, or is my mom being unfair? Update 1. So, about a week after the whole Thanksgiving ordeal, I was just starting to feel like I could let it go and move on. I had been dwelling on my mom's comments and replaying our conversation in my head way too much, but I told myself that it wasn't worth stressing over. My boyfriend had been super supportive, reminding me that everyone else at the table seemed to genuinely enjoy the evening and that I had done a great job hosting. It wasn't perfect, sure, but it was my first time hosting Thanksgiving, and I had put a ton of effort into it. I was determined to stop obsessing over what my mom said and focus on the positives. And then my sister texted me. It was a random Tuesday morning, and I was in the middle of work when I got a text from her that said, "Did you hear about Mom's December Thanksgiving?" At first, I thought it was a joke or that maybe she was exaggerating about something, so I replied, "What are you talking about?" A few seconds later, she sent me a screenshot of a group text my mom had apparently sent out to the family. The message read something like, "Hi everyone. I've decided to host a Thanksgiving dinner on December 10th so we can all enjoy a real Thanksgiving meal together this year. I'll be making all the traditional dishes, including turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and pies. Hope to see you all there." I stared at the message for a solid minute, trying to process what I was reading. My first reaction was shock, quickly followed by a wave of hurt. It felt like a slap in the face. After all the effort I had put into hosting Thanksgiving, my mom was essentially saying, "That didn't count, so let me do it properly." Calling it a real Thanksgiving. Making a point to list all the traditional dishes she knew I had deliberately chosen not to make. It felt so passive-aggressive, like she was trying to erase my Thanksgiving altogether. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this wasn't about me. Maybe my mom just really missed the traditional food and wanted an excuse to cook it. But the more I thought about it, the more it felt intentional. It wasn't just the fact that she was hosting another Thanksgiving, it was the way she framed it, like she was fixing what I had done wrong. She hadn't even talked to me about it before making plans, which made it feel even more like a deliberate jab. I called her later that day to ask about it. I tried to keep my tone neutral, but inside, I was fuming. When I brought up the December Thanksgiving, she acted completely nonchalant, like it was the most normal thing in the world. She said something along the lines of, "Oh, I just thought it would be nice to have a traditional Thanksgiving meal since we didn't really get one this year." She didn't even acknowledge how this might come across to me. It was as if my Thanksgiving never even happened. I told her that it felt disrespectful, like she was trying to undermine all the effort I had put into hosting. I explained how much work had gone into planning and cooking, and how hurtful it was that she was essentially saying it wasn't good enough. Her response. She brushed it off and said I was being overly sensitive. She insisted that this wasn't about me at all, it was just about her wanting to celebrate Thanksgiving the way she always has. She even made a comment about how traditions are important, which felt like yet another dig at me for deviating from the classic menu. After that conversation, I felt even worse. It wasn't just the December Thanksgiving itself that upset me, it was the way my mom completely dismissed my feelings. I wasn't expecting her to shower me with praise or anything, but a little acknowledgement of the work I put in would have been nice. Instead, she made me feel like my efforts didn't matter because they didn't align with her idea of what Thanksgiving should be. I vented to my boyfriend about it, and he was firmly on my side. He pointed out that hosting is a huge responsibility, and it's not fair for my mom to minimize all the thought and effort I put into the holiday. He also said that if this really wasn't about me, she could have at least phrased things differently or talked to me beforehand instead of springing it on everyone. My sister, on the other hand, thinks I'm overreacting. She said it's not that deep and that I should just let mom have her traditional Thanksgiving because it's what makes her happy. But the thing is, it is that deep to me. This isn't just about the food or the holiday itself, it's about feeling dismissed and unappreciated. It's about my mom completely ignoring the fact that I stepped up and took on a huge responsibility, only for her to turn around and act like it didn't count. Now I'm torn. On one hand, I get that traditions are really important to my mom, and maybe I did shake things up a little too much. I can see how my version of Thanksgiving might not have felt as familiar or comforting to her. But on the other hand, I feel like she's being passive-aggressive and dismissive, and it hurts. It's not like I tried to erase her traditions on purpose, I was just trying to put my own spin on things and make the holiday special in my own way. I never expected her to love everything I did, but I also didn't expect her to undermine me by hosting a redo Thanksgiving and calling it the real one. As for the December Thanksgiving, I still haven't decided if I'm going to go. Part of me wants to show up just to keep the peace, but another part of me feels like staying home as a way of standing my ground. I know my absence would probably cause more drama, but honestly, I'm so tired of bending over backward to accommodate other people's feelings while mine get brushed aside. So, Reddit, am I overreacting? Should I just suck it up and let my mom have her December Thanksgiving without making it a big deal? Or do I have a right to feel hurt and stand my ground? Update 2. After a few days of sitting on my feelings and going back and forth about whether I should attend my mom's December Thanksgiving, I decided to bite the bullet and go. My boyfriend encouraged me to go, saying it might be a good opportunity to clear the air and show my mom that I wasn't holding a grudge. He pointed out that if I didn't go, it might just add fuel to the fire and make things even more awkward between us. I wasn't sure if I agreed with him, but deep down, I knew he was probably right. The last thing I wanted was to create a rift in the family or make things even more tense. When I talked to my sister about it, she said that everyone else in the family had already RSVP'd yes. Apparently, my mom had gone all out, hyping up this real Thanksgiving to everyone and promising a menu full of all the classic dishes they had missed out on in November. My sister, of course, was completely unbothered by the whole situation. She thought it was all just mom being mom and told me to stop taking things so personally. Easy for her to say, she wasn't the one who had hosted the original Thanksgiving and poured her heart into it, only to have it essentially erased by a December do-over. Still, I decided that I wasn't going to let my mom's actions ruin the holiday spirit for me. I told myself that I would go, keep my head held high, and support her, even if it stung a little. At the end of the day, she's my mom, and despite everything, I love her. I just hoped that being there might help us find some kind of resolution or at least put the whole thing behind us. The day of the December Thanksgiving arrived, and I won't lie, I was feeling a little anxious. I didn't know what kind of energy my mom was going to bring to the table. Would she be passive-aggressive? Would she try to make jabs about my Thanksgiving? Or would she just pretend like everything was fine and act like this was the only Thanksgiving that mattered? I mentally prepared myself for all scenarios and headed over to her house. When I arrived, the house looked exactly how I remembered it from every Thanksgiving before this year. My mom had gone all out with the decorations, a big, perfectly roasted turkey as the centerpiece, bowls of mashed potatoes and stuffing on the table, and the familiar aroma of her pumpkin pies wafting through the air. It was like stepping back in time to every Thanksgiving we had growing up. The rest of the family was already there, mingling and sipping wine, and it was clear that everyone was excited to dig into the meal my mom had prepared. As soon as I walked in, my mom spotted me from across the room. She greeted me with a smile, but then she said, "Oh, you came too. Did you finally admit the failure of your feast day?" I was completely taken aback. I had prepared myself for some tension, but I wasn't expecting her to come right out with such a pointed comment. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't there to admit failure, I was there to support her and try to move past all the drama. It stung that she saw my attendance as some kind of concession rather than an olive branch. I took a deep breath, reminded myself why I was there, and calmly told her that I wasn't admitting anything. I said I was there to celebrate with her and the rest of the family, not to rehash what had happened in November. My mom seemed a little taken aback by my response, but she didn't push the issue further. I could tell she was expecting me to get defensive or start an argument, and maybe she was even a little disappointed that I didn't. We all eventually sat down at the beautifully set table, which looked like something out of a magazine. My mom had truly outdone herself with the presentation. The centerpiece was a massive roasted turkey, perfectly golden and glistening, surrounded by sprigs of rosemary and cranberries. The table was lined with elegant dishes piled high with classic sides, creamy mashed potatoes, vibrant green bean casserole topped with crispy onions, a heaping bowl of her signature stuffing, and baskets of soft, buttery rolls. There were even little name cards at each place setting, which wasn't something she normally did, but it added a touch of formality to the evening. It was clear she had gone all out, almost as if to make a statement. As everyone was getting settled, unfolding their napkins and passing dishes around to serve themselves, my mom clinked her glass to get everyone's attention. The sound rang out across the room, instantly quieting the chatter. She had that little smirk on her face, the one that always meant she had something cheeky to say. Finally, she announced with a dramatic pause, "You'll all get to taste a real Thanksgiving." For a second, there was complete silence. I glanced around the table and caught a few surprised expressions, some raised eyebrows, and my sister stifling a laugh. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. But then, almost all at once, the entire room erupted into laughter. It was one of those moments where everyone knew the comment was a bit much, but the absurdity of it made it impossible not to laugh. Even I couldn't help but chuckle at how bold she was about it. The humor in the situation helped dissolve some of the uneasiness I had been carrying since I walked through the door. As the laughter finally began to subside, I saw my chance to lean into the humor and ease the moment even further. With a smile, I said, "Mom, I think you mean Thanksgiving in December." That sent the room into another wave of laughter, even louder this time. My cousin nearly choked on his wine, my dad let out a hearty belly laugh, and my sister had to cover her mouth with her napkin as she doubled over. For a moment, it felt like the entire table was perfectly in sync, sharing a rare moment of collective amusement. Even my mom laughed, though I could tell by the twinkle in her eye that she still didn't fully grasp the irony of her hosting Thanksgiving a month late and calling it the real one. It was a strange, surreal moment, one where we all seemed to be laughing at the situation, the tension, and maybe even ourselves for how seriously we'd taken it all. As the food started making its way around the table, the conversation began to flow more naturally. The energy felt lighter, less charged, as if that moment of shared laughter had broken down the walls that had been quietly building up over the past few weeks. I let myself relax a little, leaning into the familiar rhythm of passing dishes and complimenting the food. And, of course, the food was just as delicious as I remembered from all the years my mom had hosted in the past. The turkey was perfectly moist and flavorful, the mashed potatoes were silky smooth with just the right amount of butter, and the stuffing, oh, the stuffing. It was her pride and joy, a recipe she had been perfecting for decades, and I made a point to tell her how amazing it was. I knew it would mean a lot to her to hear that, especially from me. At one point, while I was helping myself to a second serving of stuffing, I couldn't resist cracking a little joke. I glanced at her with a playful grin and said, "You know, Mom, maybe I should have borrowed your stuffing recipe for my Thanksgiving." She looked up from her plate, surprised for a second, before breaking into a wide smile. "It's a family secret," she said with mock seriousness, wagging her finger at me. The whole table chuckled again, and I could see her softening a little, basking in the compliments and the camaraderie. For the first time in weeks, it felt like we were finding a way to connect. As the evening went on, we started talking about traditions and what they mean to each of us. I told my mom that I hadn't intentionally tried to stray from tradition with my Thanksgiving, I had just wanted to try something different and make it my own. I explained that hosting for the first time was a big deal for me, and I had hoped that everyone, especially her, would see it as a gesture of love and effort, even if it wasn't exactly what they were used to. My mom listened, and for the first time, she seemed to really hear me. She admitted that she has always been very attached to her traditions and that it was hard for her to let go of the idea of Thanksgiving being done a certain way. But she also acknowledged that she might have been a little too critical of my efforts. She said she could see that I had put a lot of thought and care into hosting and that maybe she hadn't given me enough credit for that. In the end, we found a bit of common ground. My mom said that while she loves her traditional Thanksgiving, she could appreciate that I had my own way of doing things and that it was okay for the holiday to evolve as new generations take over. I told her that I could understand why the traditional menu was so important to her and that maybe next year we could find a way to incorporate both of our styles into the celebration. By the time dessert rolled around, the tension had completely dissipated, and the atmosphere was warm and light-hearted. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it felt like a step in the right direction. My mom and I are very different in how we approach things, but I think we both realized that at the end of the day, Thanksgiving, or any holiday, really, is about being together as a family. And whether it's in November or December, with ham or turkey, that's what really matters.